Japan seeks to eliminate its tiny cars. Toshiya Motors, K, with its tiny engine and wheels, looks more like a toy car than a regular truck. At a recent farmer's market, where she sells flowers from her farm here in central Japan, she loaded a mountain of things in it and drove away. In these parts, Ks are definitely the number one car, Ms. Yamada said. Big cars are too much trouble. As farmers' trucks, family cars, delivery vans, and even tiny movable restaurants, Ks are everywhere in Japan. They are more popular than ever, thanks to the country's high gasoline prices, a lower tax, and a slow economic recovery that have made the little cars popular. Ks have great fuel economies similar to the Prius, but they sell for half the price. Last year, a record 40% of all new cars sold in Japan were Ks. But industry and government officials are increasingly worried that these mini vehicles are bad for the nation's carmakers and are trying to move drivers away from them. In April, the government made what some complained was a severe decision. K drivers were hit with the multiple blows of a higher sales tax, a higher gasoline tax, and a higher K car tax, the last of which the government raised by 50%, making their tax rate much closer to regular-size cars. We need to change our direction, Yoshitoka Shindo, the Minister for Internal Affairs, said before the tax increase. Though made by some of Japan's biggest carmakers, the K pronounced like the letter K is not made for export, largely because of its small size and lack of safety equipment. The engines are limited by law to just 0.66 liter, similar to an engine of a medium-size motorcycle. Even America's smallest cars have much larger engines. That means much of the research and development that go into K cars is wasted, officials warn. Making K cars just for Japanese drivers also hurts carmakers' efforts to reduce production costs, which has become increasingly important in an age of strong global competition. As with other big carmakers, Japanese car manufacturers are using the same basic parts to build a wide range of models. Some government officials argue that Japanese carmakers increasingly cannot afford to sell only to a small, Japan-only market. Large tax breaks on K vehicles are also damaging government finances, and K cars are always a problem in trade talks between Japan and other car-producing countries, like the United States and Germany, which say Japan's tax breaks and rules for Ks protect local carmakers from foreign competition. More than 90% of cars sold in Japan are Japanese. But the push to move beyond K cars, which the government promoted in Japan's post-war years to encourage Japanese to give up their scooters and hand-pulled carts for cars, is being hurt by the success of that policy. Simply put, the Japanese love their Ks. That's especially the case in rural regions, like Shinshiro, where lower incomes and little public transportation have made the tiny cars a necessity. Here in Shinshiro, about 3/4 of families own a K car. That number is close to 100% in some parts of the country. Raising taxes on K cars is bullying the weak, said Osamu Suzuki, chairman of Suzuki Motors. The popularity of Ks is also increasing among young people living in cities, who have been hit hardest by Japan's long, slow income growth. About 26% of K drivers last year said they had moved down from a bigger, standard-size car, according to a survey published in April by the Japan Car Manufacturers Association. Ks have also become an important form of transport for Japanese women, who make up about 65% of K car drivers. Women in Shinshiro said that their husbands drove standard-size cars, but that their families would struggle to buy and maintain a second standard-size car. Yui Shirai said that her family might not be able to own a second car and she might not be able to work if not for the low cost, low taxes, and low fuel needs. The new K taxes have been recently included in the debate over what some Japanese see as a growing gap between the rich and the poor under the Prime Minister's economic reforms. Critics charge that the big measures Mr. Abe has pushed so far, raising taxes, increasing oil prices, and pushing up inflation, have hit poorer Japanese the hardest. Almost 20% of K owners surveyed said they would consider giving up their cars altogether because of higher taxes, while 10% would buy standard-size cars. The burden appears to be heaviest for families with children, and for young people with low incomes, the survey said. Pain from the higher K taxes is also being felt more by Japan's smaller carmakers, which depend more on K car sales. They have complained loudly that raising K taxes reduces their sales, endangering jobs. Suzuki, for example, has said that it expects K sales to decrease this year because of the higher taxes. It was one of only 2 carmakers that did not give raises to its employees this year. Suzuki also argues that manufacturing Ks helps other parts of its business. It uses some of the K technology, for example, in small cars that it sells in India, and Suzuki has been improving its Ks, changing them from cheap cars with few quality features. Now, Suzuki's best-selling wagon-R mini car has nice seats, a small battery that can capture energy when the car slows down, and an advanced, radar-assisted braking system. These are technologies they can use across all its models, Suzuki says. In the past, people used to say they'd settle for a K. Now they say they desire a K, said Arataka Okajima, a Suzuki spokesman. Still, the future is difficult for Japan's minicars. Daihatsu's president, Masanori Mitsui, warned on April 28 that the carmaker expected K sales in Japan to decrease by some 500,000 vehicles over the next 2 years, from 2.23 million last year to 1.7 million in 2015. Tokishi Suzuki, 67, who sells coffee from the back of his Mitsubishi minicab microvan, said raising taxes on Ks would damage Japanese small businesses. Ks are the working man's friend, he said. How could they do this to us?